Hello, and welcome to World Civilizations 2. We are studying the 1500s until the present day in world history, and we are on chapter 51, and we're talking about the Muslim world. So let's go ahead. The first thing I wanted to do, this isn't the greatest sign in the world, but I often write this on the board, and that's such when I am teaching. Whoops, trying to get it to you. So the types of Muslims, I'm trying to get this to you. So in every religion, I just read a book and also listened to a podcast that in every single religion, there are 6% fundamentalists, which are extremists. So there are 6% fundamentalists in Christianity, in Hinduism, and even in Buddhism. If you look at, there is actually a fundamentalist movement that is actually killing Muslims in Myanmar, and they're Buddhists. There's a Buddhist monk, and his name is the Venerable W. So every single religion, even though Buddhism is supposed to be extremely peaceful, and Buddha would totally be rolling over in his grave, or in his nirvana. Anyway, there is 6% of fundamentalists, and that's not a religion problem, that's a human problem. So they're taking it too far. And then there are what we call mystics. And what's really cool about mystics, there's actually a mystic, there's a mystic theology school in San Francisco, and mystics are the super, super loving group. And so there's a mystic, there's a like joint, there's Jewish, Christian, Hindu, theology school, Muslim, and they all get together, and they don't try to convert or change each other. They just share their ideas and try to learn about each other. So that would be the mystics, and they're super loving. And maybe you've heard of the whirling dervishes, and maybe I'll put a little video on for you to see that, because it's super interesting. Also, in the Muslim religion, Islam, there's the Sunnis. Now the Sunnis are different because they have two separate leaders. They have a political leader and a religious leader. So it's kind of like their idea of separation of church and state. Because what's really crazy is, as you're reading this chapter, you'll notice a man called Ayatollah Khomeini. Okay, and he is a leader that is in, I believe it's Iran, who embodies, and this is what the Shiites believe, and they are much more fundamentalists in their belief system, in a smaller number, by the way, but they're louder. So you know what happens with the louder number. You think there's more of them. There's not, okay? So extreme fundamentalists. And then, Shiites, there are some Shiites that are more moderate, but where we get or terrorism, that sort of thing, it's just 6%, 3 to 6% of the Islam community. And I want to challenge you about something. Should probably go back first. The Shiites believe in one leader who is both religious and political, and that is powerful. And we know in history that pattern is not a good mixture, because if you look at the Middle Ages, that's why they were the Dark Ages, is because the Pope held the power over the kings. And really, he had more power than they did. And it was that, separating church and state, whether you're religious or not. Many very religious people are for separating church and state, because you can use religion to harm people, to twist it and to hurt them. And thousands were murdered in the Crusades. And there's just all kinds of issues where that arises. So this also is true for Christianity. There's mystics, okay, in Christianity. You don't hear about them often. A lot of times they're the saints in the Catholic churches, okay? But there's even more of them coming out in Protestantism as well. And then you have kind of your moderates, middle of the road, and then you have your fundamentalists, 3 to 6%. And if you think that Christianity is above terrorism, I want to recall in another one of my classes, we're talking about the 1980s and 1990s, there were over 250 bombings by Christian extremists. They were bombing abortion clinics and killing people. So they were standing up and protesting what they felt was saving lives, and then they were killing people. So also, if you look at um, the oh, is it Waynesboro? I'm going to say Waynesboro Baptist Church, and I believe it's in Kansas. They are extremely militant in their hate, and that would be the 6% fundamentalist, 3 to 6%, and they're in fact at many schools where I teach, I'll try to look it up and it'll be blocked as a terrorist site. So in every religion, they have a 3 to 6% fundamentalist, extreme fundamentalists that kind of are based on hate, which is really very sad. And then mystics, very loving. They have the Sufis. You read about Sufis, they're fantastic. And then the majority is not. Even many Shiites are extremely, more moderate, okay? But the Sunnis and the Sufis, but that loud group is often the ones that are hurt. So I just wanted to point that out before we got started with our PowerPoint. Really interesting stuff. I want to start out, and I know that we did this in our class, I want to start out and let you know that Islam is a very peaceful religion. And I know when I first heard that at grad school, I was like, what? Because I had actually been taught the opposite. But as I did research and I did my reading, it truly is. And if you look at Muhammad's life, he was an extremely peaceful person who often pardoned entire groups of people, giving them second chances. Again, in Christianity's past, we've had the Crusades, we've had killings, we've had all kinds of things that are bad marks upon Christianity. But again, if you look at Jesus's life, he was peaceful, okay? He was peaceful and had a mission of peace. So it's really important not to get taken away with these stereotypes. Historians hate stereotypes because stereotypes kill people, like literally. They kill people. So take each person and individual that you meet one at a time for who they are. Okay, so that was free. Okay. All right, so here we are. Ooh, I think I need to change my screen. Let's change the screen. Okay, here we go. Put in the bottom and, oh, sorry, I'm going to make you sick because I'm going back and forth and back and forth. Okay. Here we go. And we are going to do that one more time. All right, so the re-emergence of the Muslim world. Here we have the Palestinian Intifada, boys throwing stones at Israeli soldiers beginning in 1989 under Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO leadership. You have to understand the Palestinians were living in what we now call Israel. And then after World War II, Great Britain, as you read in your notes, in your text, they promised the Arabs a pan-Arab state, and they also were promising the there's Israeli stuff. And then the Israelis got land and the Arabs didn't. And so that was Great Britain, kind of talking out of two sides of their mouth, which we call two-faced, which is not a good idea. And there was a big conflict because land was taken from someone who was already living there. Okay. We have the chronology of the chapter, the McMahon letter, which talks about promises made by the Great Britain to the Arab nations, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, Balfour Declaration on Palestine, the Ataturk leads Turkey, a great leader in Turkey, mandate territories become independent states, Israel founded, Israeli-Arab wars began, Suez Canal nationalized by Egypt, Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, Six-Day War, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, oil boycott, Iranian Revolution, Soviet intervention of Afghanistan, Camp David Accords, and warfare between Egypt and Israel, Iraq-Iran wars, Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, Gulf War against Iraq, peace agreement between Israel and PLO, renewed Israeli-Palestinian confrontation, Al-Qaeda attack on World Trade Center, U.S. occupation of Afghanistan and Iraq, Osama bin Laden is killed, and Arab Spring and spreading chaos and the appearance of ISIL or ISIS. Okay. Muslim world today, 1/6 of the world's population. It's a dominant religion in 38 countries. There's 148 million Arabs, 1 billion non-Arabs. okay, that are Muslim in Indonesia, Pakistan, and India, Bangladesh. Middle East gained importance in the 20th century. Oil was crucial. Largest known oil fields are in Muslim countries. Arab nationalism. Arabs with British support rose against the Ottoman Turks. Arabs were expected to gain their independent state under a Hashemite sheikh. Wartime diplomacy, conflicting promises, big issue. Really fueled the Palestinian-Israeli wars. Egypt, with its strong nationalism, gained pro-independence. Suez Canal, very important. Saudi Arabia, conservative rule, little economic development. Pan-Arabian, it's not coming out. Pan-Arabism, movement to unite all Arabs under one political center. Okay, but after the war, it kind of went defunct. Ottomans defeated after siding with Germany. Greeks attempted to invade Anatolia, Mustafa Kemal, and he was the Ataturk, the father of Turkey. And he really tried to move Turkey into a forward motion because it was farther, it wasn't like modernized, and he was trying to modernize it. He was their first president. He strove to modernize, secularize, and westernize. Western dressed, abolished the veil, or the hijab. Women legally equal to men. Wow. Polygamy was forbidden. Western schooling for both sexes. New Western-based legal code. Capital moved from half Greek Istanbul to Ankara in the Turkish heartland. Ataturk's success made him a role model for former reformers. Palestine, the McMahon letters. Please read that. That's really troubling. Colonel T.E. Lawrence of Arabia. Great movie. If you watch it and you write a summary and your reflection, I'll give you 5 bonus points. Half the movie, of course. Balfour Declaration favored the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, so as long as it was not at the expense of non-Jewish communities in Palestine to return to Jewish political support during World War I. British sought to win Jewish political support, especially of Zionist Jewish nationalists. Okay, Jewish immigrants from Europe began in the 1880s. It picked up with the founding of the Zionist movement with Theodor Herzl. Interesting guy to read about. Arabs, Jews increasing hostile in the 1920s riots. Huge increase in immigration after the Balfour Declaration. Palestine was 30% Jewish at the beginning of World War II. Post-World War II, refugees from Nazis overwhelmed British attempts to control. United Nations proposed partition of Palestine when British announced their withdrawal. 1948 war, Zionist leaders proclaimed creation of Nation of Israel, May 1948. Wow. Israel today is not even 100 years old. May 1948. Okay. Israel defeats the Arabs, expels hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Okay, we have somebody coming in and then expelling them. Something that's really interesting that I've been watching on the news is there are groups of Jews in Israel that are really trying to mend that very broken relationship, and they have different camps where Palestinian teenagers and Israeli teenagers come together, and they realize that they're not so different, that they're people. Just like this huge divide in our country with the past election between Republicans and Democrats, just spending time with people really does help shorten that bridge. And, I heard a great quote this week, and it was called, "It's really hard to hate up close." So when you get close to someone, you get to know them, it changes your mind. It opens your mind. Definitely true. But the problem is there is no conversation. Okay, so we have the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, lots of bloodshed, very much like a Cold War division. The rise of Islamism. Islam does not separate church and state. Church and state unity as a natural is a unity of the body and personality. Explosive movements. We talked about that. But this is the Shiite form. The Shiite form of Muslims, Islam, is where you put the religious leader and the political leader together. Okay. And in Sunni Muslims do not. They want 2 separate leaders. That's much safer, that separation. Rise of Islamism. All right, this is a neat picture. French officer T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, Turkish officer, Prince Faisal. All right. Get more. The rise of Islamism, Iranian Revolution, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and OPEC. All right. Iran is present-day name of the country, and that was the ancient Persian Empire, which was an amazing empire, and it did have many Islamic rulers and interwoven. But what you have to understand, and a lot of people don't talk about this, is that actually, if you look at the original Islam, many times they coexisted with Christians and Jews perfectly. Okay, because if you converted, so if you wanted to remain a Christian or a Jew, you just had to pay a small tax. And if you converted, there'd be no tax base. So they did not force conversions. So this whole idea of forced conversions is not historically accurate. And that's why we have to go back to the original into history, because this fear and all, it sounds like the Red Scare all over again. All this fear, this misconceptions, these wrong information is pumped into our society, and it's wrong. All right. Iranian Revolution.
It's 6 o'clock.
And here we have talking about an Iranian woman consults with her mullah, and they, with the Ayatollah Khomeini, he took it back further into the extreme fundamentalist religious practices, where hijabs had to be worn again, coverings. And if you did not, this very conservative religious, covering your head, you were shamed, and there was a lot of fear and guilt thrown into this. The oil weapon, OPEC and the 1973 boycott with Jimmy Carter, Gulf War and invasion of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. There are some amazing stories about him. Very interesting. Okay, he was removed. There are some stories about how many of the Iraqi families would keep their beautiful daughters at home because Saddam Hussein's sons were at universities, and they could have any woman they wanted. There was no way for them to say no. So many of the families hid their daughters and kept them away from him. There just was a lot of abuse there. Oil trade, nations today is much less politicized. There are still fundamentalists, but like I said, that's 3 to 6%. We hear the ones that are loud and doing terroristic things, but we don't. It talked about at the beginning of this PowerPoint just how many Muslims are in the world, and they are peaceful, and we need to remember that. Okay. They are extremists. Arab Spring is very interesting because Arab nations were looking at some of the abuses of power, and they were, as a nation, coming up and rising up and asking for democracy and asking for equality. And it's so neat. We had neat speakers come in about the Arab nations or the Arab Springs, and this is where they're kind of waking up in an enlightenment to more equality. All right, I just wanted to show you this as a neato map. The Arab Spring has had differing levels of impact and have assumed broadly different natures and outcomes across Near and Middle East, as shown on this map. A really neato protest, different things going on. The Egyptian kind of Arab Spring was started by Facebook, okay? And somebody wrote something about a Facebook page on a wall, and it traveled through social media, and it erupted into this Arab Spring and into a big protest of inequality in Egypt. So really interesting stuff. Alrighty, and we will end there. Great. Thank you very much, and have a great night.